Donald Trump once again threatened India, vowing to substantially raise tariffs over India's continued imports of Russian oil. In a post on Truth Social, Trump claimed India is not just buying Russian oil in large volumes, but also reselling it on the open market for big profits. Trump is accusing India of funding the war in Ukraine. Now, Trump's new threat comes just days after he announced a blanket 25% tariff on Indian goods, along with the mention of an additional penalty, though no specifics have yet been provided. Now, Trump's latest warning also coincides with his growing frustration with Moscow for refusing to agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine, even hinting at fresh sanctions on Russia. Finally, the Indian government has issued a strong statement in response to Trump's latest post. The Ministry of External Affairs has stated it has been targeted by the United States and EU over its purchase of Russian oil. India began importing from Russia because traditional supplies were diverted to Europe after the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now, the United States at that time actively encouraged such imports by India for strengthening global energy market stability. The strongly worded statement also said that countries criticizing India's trade with Russia are themselves indulging in trade with Russia, that too on non-vital national compulsion. EU's trade with Russia in 2024 stood at $67.5 billion, significantly more than India's. Europe continues to import LNG from Russia. Meanwhile, US continues to import uranium from Russia for its nuclear industry and palladium for its EV industry. The double standards of US and EU have been called out clearly by the government of India, sending a strong message that India is not a pushover. Remember, trade talks between India and US are scheduled to resume on August 25th, but the diplomatic climate seems to have changed significantly. Economist Mitali Nikore joins me this morning. Mitali, first up, a 25% tariff, then a threat to expand it owing to Russian oil imports, then calling India and Russia dead economies, and now a moral pressure on India by US President Donald Trump saying that our oil imports from Russia are funding Russia's aggression on Ukraine. What's going on with Trump's public tirades against India?
I think honestly, Kartik, yesterday night when this came out, and I was speaking to a number of friends in the US at that time because I've just returned from a 3-week trip, to the US. All of the negotiators, all of the Indian delegation, this is really getting into a territory which is, quite hostile. Because for a president of a country, regardless of whether it is the United States, for president of any country, coming out and saying that, another country is doing arbitrage of oil in international oil markets, you need to have solid proof before you tweet out or say out something like this in the public.
Right.
I mean, giving an opinion on saying, oh, India is a dead economy. Of course, we have enough data to prove that we're not a dead economy. We are the world's fastest growing economy and have been for the last 3 years.
And the fifth largest economy, racing to be in the top 3 in the next 2 years. But Mitali, India doesn't import oil from Venezuela or Iran, and again, owing to US sanctions on them. Now, if Russia is also taken out of the equation, how is India expected to protect its own national economic interests?
No, so at this point in time, Kartik, as the MEA statement has made it very clear, we are going to purchase oil in international markets as per the international rules or based order and, the global order. So in that situation, of course, at this point in time, the sanctions on Russian oil are not there, which is why we have been purchasing this oil. And if you notice, even the Biden administration, at the time when the Ukraine conflict started, put down special permits for uranium and palladium for the US and EU to continue buying uranium and palladium for the nuclear industries and for the electronics
But with that
industries.
logic, Mitali, Trump should now go ahead and impose tariffs on itself for buying uranium and palladium from the Russian market.
Absolutely, not just themselves, but also on Europe, also on the UK, also on all of the Western economies. So there is absolutely no reason for, singling out India. Even Brazil and China have been purchasing Russian oil, and he hasn't actually talked about this, with the BRICS countries. Of
Right.
course, he's been very against the BRICS.
Right.
In other ways.
So stay with Russia and the Russian oil import, and let's talk about China, India, and as well as Brazil that buy oil from Russia. Now, if let's say hypothetically these countries were to stop buying Russian oil, What's going to happen to global crude prices? These are already at elevated levels above $70 a barrel. Can the world really afford putting Russian oil out of the oil equation?
So if you would have noticed, Kartik, in the last 2 months, OPEC has actually increased its production, almost doubled its, projections for production. And in the month, on a monthly basis, they've actually started increasing production by almost 10 to 15% month on month, because OPEC does presume that even though these countries may not shift completely from buying Russian oil, it may be a situation where you start reducing your purchases of Russian oil slowly and start increasing purchases from the OPEC countries a little bit more. So
Right.
that has already started happening. And the second thing is that OPEC is actually projecting that oil prices could even go up to $150 a barrel, which is more than double of the rate that's prevailing today, if all countries stop purchasing Russian oil completely.